start it. Mark, floor is yours.
Hi everyone. Thank you for having me. This is very cool to be here. As Hannah said, I'm living in Argentina and just flew in this morning from Barcelona. There you go. And glass of wine in hand. I'm sorry you guys don't have any, but later on I think we're having a break, right? So I want to talk to you today about OpenVino. And this is a project I've been working on for several years, but really launched in a big way, or launched officially, let's say last year, just about a year ago. Some more people coming in. So just a bit of background. I'm from the US, live and based in Argentina. I spend a lot of time traveling every year. I'm an IT person. I've been working since the late 80s, early 90s in data center spaces and doing IT things, as you do. But for some reason, in 2003, without thinking it through very much, decided to get in the wine business, buy a piece of land in Mendoza, Argentina, in the west of Argentina. This is the 5th or 6th largest wine producing region in the world. But I don't come from a background of wine. I have no idea what I'm doing. So I buy a piece of land and plant vineyard, Malbec, Petit Verdot, Cabernet Sauvignon, 3 beautiful grapes that I like, and decide to do a single vineyard, organic, grape production, and start making wine. So 2007, once the plants have their first decent harvest, start producing wine with a friend, an enologist, and we start making wine. And I think, great, this is how difficult can this be to sell wine? I'm combining at the same time doing IT things. I was working at the time in Mumbai with some data center projects there, and so traveling around the world with bottles under my arm and thinking, well, if you make a decent product, people will spend money on it and buy your wine, and how difficult could it be? If you've ever thought about opening a restaurant, or had a friend that got into the restaurant business without knowing what they're doing, this is a similar experience. It's very naive. It's all kinds of complications about the wine business. So initially, I started doing the traditional steps, which would be going to wine competitions, going around to restaurants, to shops, tastings, holding events, conventions, these kinds of things, to get people to taste the wine and start to sell. And with some different moderate success along the way. But in this process, basically I run across, some of my slides are in Spanish, but that's okay. I basically run across 3 major questions. One is, what should be the price of a bottle of wine? Right? What's the price point that I should set? And for somebody that, like myself, that didn't know, you'd think, well, this is my cost, I want a bit of profit, this will be the price, and that's how you set. And price of a wine is based on the quality. Unfortunately, that's not really how it works. When you walk into a wine shop or a restaurant, and I take in my bought product and I say, I'm making this beautiful organic Malbec from Argentina, they don't say, well, great, let's taste it, or how much is it? The question is, I have 25 other wines on the menu. Why is somebody going to order your wine and not this wine? Right? The price-quality equation is really a secondary thing. It's more about what kind of demand are you going to create for your product. The second question is really a more fundamental one for me, which is how do people know, how can I communicate the qualities of the wine? But when I see a case or pallet bottles leaving the winery, where do they end up? You know, you put a lot of effort and love and attention into making something, and then you say, well, is this ending up at somebody's birthday party? Are they sad? Are they in a good mood? They're drinking at the right temperature. What foods are they comparing this with, pairing this with? and all kinds of questions that we don't really have an easy answer to, meaning how can we do an extreme traceability, right? I know the distributors and the importers that are buying. I'm selling in Argentina, Brazil, India, a little bit now in Europe, Canada, but I don't really know that much beyond where they're going to. So is there a way we can get around that question? And the third question has to do with a question of truth. So I realized that when I go to present the wine, I would say to somebody, I say, you know, I throw half the grapes on the ground every year. We only select the proper ones. We have these, you know, strict controls for quality. We put all kinds of love and attention into it. These are organically grown grapes. And I'm telling all these things, and I'm looking at the people, and I said, yeah, but they hear the same message from all the wineries. Everybody says something similar about their product. And there's a lot of misconceptions. There's a lot of lies in the wine industry, right? And what the wine industry sells people is not what they think it is. So the other day, a couple of months ago, I was in Ribera del Duero in Spain, beautiful wine region, visiting a friend, and he has a 10-hectare plot, beautiful winery, and outside, just the land. I mean, there's a really tiny construction there. He's just built with some stones, made a place to have like a barbecue and get out of the sun during the harvest. And we look very rustic. And we're looking at this. He goes, "You like this?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, let me show you something." And he takes out his phone and he shows me an advertisement, a short video that you see the camera pan across the vineyard, and there's a voice and off saying, you know, in our family for 10 generations we've been making wine, and you see a woman extending a tablecloth on the table, and the kids are running, and there's smoke as they're cooking meats and everything, and there, you know, everybody's with their glasses in the air. And he said, "Yeah, I lent the space for an advertisement for this other winery that's 300 kilometers away," right? So you're looking at this advertisement and you're saying, okay, they're selling something, but it's not their land, it's not their grapes, it's not even their region, it's not their family, because these are all actors, it's not their barbecue, it's just all, but that's what they're selling. And so when you look at the way, the message about when people say I'm organic or I'm not organic or fair trade or any of these kinds of labels, how do we know that any of this is true, right? So how can we determine what the correct price should be? How do we know where the product ends up and what kind of traceability mechanisms are available to us? And can we implement some extreme transparency so that people know that what I'm telling them is the truth, or they can investigate more about the product that we're making and share that information with the world, right? So transparency, traceability, and tokenization, that's blockchain, right? So we start working on the idea of saying, how could we create an open source winery, where basically all of the IP, everything that we do for intellectual property, for winemaking, for the business model, for our accounting, production, all of these things is completely transparent and open, and people can copy this, replicate it, criticize it, steal it, whatever they would like. What about doing a wine-backed crypto asset? And I'm going to make an argument that I think that wine is the best metaphor that we have for cryptocurrency or crypto assets today. And I'll get to that in a bit. And then the concept of you drink it, you own it. How can we take and create a new business model that is based on not only sustainability and transparency, but also an ethical business model where we're actually taking the consumers and in some cases turning them into partners. Okay, so this is the concept behind OpenVino. Now, OpenVino, like I said, is an open source project. My company is called Costa Flores, and my wine is called MTB, Mike Tango Bravo. And we created separately OpenVino with the idea of this as a way that we're doing a digital transformation in the first instance for Costa Flores, for my winery, but could be applied to other wineries in Argentina and other regions, or in fact to other different types of companies as a model to follow or to replicate or to take some ideas from. So basically, how does this work? Well, let's first look at the question of extreme transparency, right? When I was saying that I want to share the data so that people know that what we're doing is true, what we're telling them is the truth, how does this actually instrument? So in the first case for extreme transparency, for OpenVino, we have a series of basically 4 data points that we want to share from the vineyard, from the winery, and from the business. And this is through a series of things. First of all, with IoT sensors. So very basic sensors that are spread throughout the vineyard. I have 16 different sensors buried at different points, at different depths underground, for collecting the humidity from irrigation. Mendoza is a desert, it's an oasis. It's the 3rd largest oasis in the world after the Central Valley of California and Israel. So water management is very important. It's all, not only is it for efficiency, but for proper grape production, because grapes are an interesting crop. You can grow grapes anywhere in the world. They're pretty much in any climate will adapt, but you want your grapes to suffer at the right time, be a little bit thirsty or not have too rich a soil. There's some certain conditions where basically that's why if you grow grapes in Argentina or in places that are traditional grape growing regions that have maybe a poor soil, they have very hot summers, very cold winters, hot in the afternoon, cold in the evening, at night, and you want to play with that and manage the water as much as possible. Other sensors we have are just basic weather sensors, temperature, humidity, wind direction and speed for spraying things on the crops. There's certain organic applications you can do. So it's about collecting data in the vineyard about what's happening at that moment and what's happening in the winery itself. The second thing is about the human effort. So what are we doing in the vineyard today? Well, today we're coloring grapes in the Malbec section between rows 35 and 52. Okay. Well, what does that mean? Can we describe this as a work ticket to explain what it is that goes into the grapes that day, what's happening in the vineyard, what's happening in the marketing aspect, what all the different things that we're doing? How can we document this and share this information with the world? Cameras we're putting together, we haven't gotten this one in yet, but 360 cameras that do time-lapse, just as a photographic evidence of what's happening. And most importantly, and this is probably the most unique aspect, is the question of the business itself. So can we take a small business like Costa Flores and provide all of the accounting and say this is what we spent on the bottle, on the label, on the cork, on the packaging, on the shipping, on taxes, on salaries, on diesel for the tractor, for all these different things, and share all of this data and say we spend 15 pesos on a cardboard box to ship it in, and this is how much wine we sold in Europe and in Spain, or in India, in Argentina, in Brazil, and be absolutely transparent with this. Right? Now, if you're a medium-sized company, a large or enterprise, you probably don't want to. There's some value in your secrets, in your strategic planning and how much you spent on your providers. For a small company, my secrets are worthless because I have no leverage for doing business against any other competitor because of my size. But extreme transparency could be of value because I can have a different dialogue with the people that I'm selling to. And if I say I'm spending 15 pesos for that cardboard box, the only thing that could happen is a competitor of cardboard boxes will say, well, I'll sell it to you for 14, There's really no value in me keeping this information secret. So the idea here is taking the data from the sensors, from the work log, from camera, from the accounting data from our ERP platform, and publishing that information on the web, but using the blockchain, in this case, as a mechanism for non-repudiation. Right? Why do we even need the blockchain here? Well, for one primary reason. If I'm saying that I'm organic, or fair trade, or any of these other certifications, why do I have to pay a third-party company to come and certify and say something that I already know to be the truth? If I can publish all the data in practically in real time, at 1,000 times the amount of data that they would certify, isn't that a self-certification that's much more valuable than today's traditional organic or fair trade or certification? So it allows us to do different kinds of ethical business practices, and specifically in organic viticulture. Now, 2 years ago, just when we were getting going, I went to the Organic World Congress that was in India that year, and basically spoke to the certifying bodies, those are the people that go to these types of events, and said, you guys are going to go out of business, right? We talk about using cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, and the myriad of other tokens and coins, and how this is going to transform fintech. Why? Because we don't need the middleman of the banking system to validate transactions that are peer-to-peer between two people. What is different in this case is that we're not talking in this instance about a financial transaction, but I'm saying, listen, today in the vineyard it was 22 degrees, and this is when we irrigated, and this is the products that we applied onto the vineyard, and this is 100% organic, and all this information, our accounting data and our weather data and everything else, is written into the blockchain in a way that I can't go back and change this. So why should I pay a third party for this? Today, how organic viticulture, or in fact organic agriculture, works might be surprising to you. In that I get a visit once or twice a year from an inspector. They call me several weeks ahead of time to arrange a date, and they come to my house, and they have mate or coffee, and we sit there, and they said, okay, Mike, did you apply pesticides in the vineyard this year? And I said, no, I didn't. Did you apply any other toxic chemicals that you're not supposed to? I did not. Okay, can I see some receipts from things that you bought to see that nothing that you're not supposed to buy is on those receipts? And they go through my receipts and go, okay, this is good. Can I see your work log? And I give them a printed out work log, and they go, okay, you did these things. Wonderful, you're certified another year, and they charge me, and we do this. Now, why is this model the way it is? And this is not just because I'm in Argentina and they don't know what they're doing, and in Europe you do it properly. No, it's not that. The point is, if we can't eliminate doping in the Olympics, how do we expect that we can eliminate 1,000 different molecules of products that you can apply in agriculture? We have to believe what the farmers are telling us because we don't have the visibility from the day-to-day. And also the idea that I can go and grab leaves and take some dirt samples and run off to the lab and look for, herbicides, and we could do that, but it's very expensive. And most of these drugs, most of these products that are used are very volatile, that might only last a year or a week in the environment to be easily detectable. So we really have to depend on believing what the producers are telling us. And there's a lot of lying behind this. That's just the truth. Now, you could say, well, yes, but your sensors, you could fake all this data from the very beginning. But as the more information you publish about your work logs, about the products you use, about your accounting, about all these other things, the more information that I publish, the more that what I'm doing is based on a reputation. And so if I had bought a herbicide from somebody and I'm going around the world telling people about how organic we are, I said, no, here's the receipt. This is the day he bought it. I can, it would put too much in play for me to do that, to risk it. And yet, you're never going to have a biodigital certification that is anything similar to this in the existing organic or fair trade or whichever of these certifications you want. So this is manifest in the situation that we find ourselves that pretty much any of your packaging today will have labels for things that many of these certifications are completely meaningless. So this is my deodorant, and it's naturally derived, whatever that means, doesn't mean anything. Gluten-free, which is really helpful. Please recycle, right? That's nice. Aluminum-free, we're going to assume that that actually means something, though it's not a certification that I know of. And cruelty-free may or may not be something that's meaningful, right? The only one of these packages that means anything is this of an Indian restaurant in Barcelona that's 90% vegan, right? I believe that, whatever 90% vegan means. The point I'm getting at is that there's a lot of nonsense in our packaging, and this is creating confusion with consumers, and it's really making it more difficult if we're looking to do more eco-friendly or more sustainable or more ethical business models. In the case of wine, this confusion is multiplied by 10 because of the amount of information that you see on a wine label. You think, why are they printing all this stuff? Well, most of it's legislated from some level or another. But you have natural wines, you have biodynamic wines, you have organic wines, you have conventional wines. They all mean different things, and most people don't understand the difference. And we can get into that at some other time, but the point is that there's a lot of confusion, and I think that we can use the blockchain for creating this model of extreme transparency that's of real value. Now, let's talk about the price. I said that I'm looking for a way to properly price my wines. And when I mean properly, I mean I don't want to decide the price at all. I want the marketplace to define. I want consumers to set the price. Right? So how can we do this? Well, first I want to go back to what I said a few minutes ago, that I think that wine is our best metaphor for cryptocurrency. I know that sounds strange. It doesn't sound strange. It sounds even stranger when you talk to a wine crowd, right? They go, what are you talking about, blockchain? But I look at it like this. So one of the big problems with explaining, I'm sure you've all had this happen, that when you explain to somebody the first time what Bitcoin is or what cryptocurrencies is, you run across the problem that people don't really understand money. So before you can talk about cryptocurrency, it's what is this thing that we have, this concept of money, and money being nothing more than this fictitious value that we've, out of emergence, we've decided that something is worth, right? But I like to use these two examples to talk about that and its value. So we have a painting, Cy Twombly, Bacchus, 2005, sold for 20 million euro. And Pingus, which is a Spanish wine from Ribera del Duero, 2005, it's about 3,000 euro, 2,500 euro available today. Okay. Both very expensive, and we could both argue about are they really worth this or not. That's really not the point. But the difference is that when we're talking about size painting, we're all looking at it. And so you might say it's worth 10 million, and I could say it's 20 million, and she could say it's worth 15 million or 15. But we're all looking at the painting. In the case of a bottle of wine, wine is a token. It's a piece of glass that has no intrinsic value, much like a paper note. So if I have a 100 euro note, it actually isn't worth anything at that moment. It's a piece of paper. It represents a potential use in the future, just like a bottle of wine represents a potential experience in the future. When I uncork the bottle, it's worthless. When I spin the bill, it's also, for me, out of my hands. So that's why, in a sense, a bottle of wine is a token. Now, what's more interesting about that is, if you think about it, if I said, I have the world's best beer here, and all of the beer critics in the world came together and said, this is a 100-point beer. You know, there's never been a better beer than this. And I offered you if you wanted to taste it. If you're a beer drinker, you'd say, yeah, I'd love to. I'd say, well, it's 100 euro for a bottle. I said, not going to pay €100 for a bottle of beer. But you wouldn't think twice about it in the case of wine. Right? There are €2 wines and there are €20,000 wines. And so that order of magnitude of price difference, which again is all based on this fictitious common belief we have about wine, makes it this interesting value token that we can use when we're talking about money and compare it to cryptocurrency. So it's about creating an open source winery and creating a wine token, and then following this up with you drink it, you own it, which I'll get to in a second. Now at this point, let me explain how we've tackled the problem, or working on the problem of the pricing. And this is wine-backed crypto. Now I know that a lot of the crypto world doesn't like the term backed, but what we're doing is issuing a crypto asset, an ERC20 token. That one token is worth one bottle of the wine that we produce on the vineyard in Mendoza. Okay, now at this point, I would explain to you all what blockchain is. I'm not going to do that, but let's see precisely how the tokenization works with our production. So, new harvest. We started this last year in southern hemisphere in Argentina. We harvest grapes in my place last week of March. Last year was the first week of April, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th of April. Harvest all the grapes. They go into tanks. We start fermentation. By the time the fermentation is finished, about 3-4 weeks later, press the solids, take the solids out. Basically at this point we know how many liters there were produced for this season, for this vintage. Wine also, by the way, is a very controlled substance. So it's food and it's alcohol. So the government wants to know how many liters in which tank, who owns it, who's controlling this. I mean, this is like any other type of food production. It's quite looked after. So I can't go back and the next year create 2018 again, right, without doing some very illegal things. So essentially, by the 1st of May, we know how many liters of wine we've produced in a year. And therefore, we know the equivalent number of bottles. In 2018, there were 16,384 bottles. Right? So, we issued 16,384 tokens, ERC20 tokens on the Ethereum blockchain. These tokens are called MTB18 for the 2018 production of the MTB1, Mike Tango Bravo 1. So immediately, on the 6th of May, we did our ICO and put these tokens up for sale. Now, the way we sold the tokens was through 2 channels. One is through a crowd sale. People send Ether to a smart contract and receive tokens in exchange at a fixed rate. And the other way, which most people used, was going to our e-commerce site, credit card, PayPal, Bitcoin, buying the tokens, tell us your wallet ID, and we send you the tokens. Now the reason we did both of these instead of just doing the crowd sale is because 90% of the buyers had never owned cryptocurrency before. And if I had to explain to them, you need to go out and buy some Bitcoin so you can buy some Ether, and then you need to pay the gas to send this to this smart contract, it's just too complicated at this stage. I don't know if you've all seen the Lemon Coin video. If you haven't, it's very funny. It explains kind of what this is talking about. We're so much in the infancy of tokenization that to explain to everybody the process you would need to do from scratch was too much, so we said let's just create a website, e-commerce page using Magento, fill out your form, give us your ID for your wallet. Here's a tutorial with a video explaining how to install a wallet, how to create your first crypto wallet, and then we send you the tokens. So this is what we did starting on the 6th of May. Sold just over half of the tokens from the production. We're keeping a quarter of this for marketing, and the rest of it basically a margin, so that if I have a pallet that falls over in the bottle smash, we can take those out of the pool and still have a bit of a buffer there for the coming years. Now, in early September, we started selling the tokens on exchange. Now, the exchange we're using is called Ripio. It's an Argentine exchange for now. This week, Brazil is entering, so right now you can buy with Argentine pesos or Brazilian real on the Ripio exchange. And starting in the beginning of March, we'll be able to do Bitcoin to MTB18 or Ethereum to, so that the rest of the world that have bought tokens and want to sell them, or people that want to buy tokens, can go onto the exchange and to do trading. So
Sorry, I have a question. Have you experienced any difficulties with liquidity in your case? Because in Argentina in general, I heard that many exchanges, they struggle with liquidity for Bitcoin even.
I mean, so this is never going to be a high volume trading token. So the answer is yes, for a couple of reasons. Ripio started their exchange, they took it offline, and they've just put it back online, so there's a lapse for about a month that there wasn't any trading done. When they were preparing for Brazil and now for Mexico. We went through all the regulatory steps with them, and so there was some time that the exchange wasn't really doing much of anything. But it's not really the same liquidity formula that you would expect for other kinds of tokens, given the fact that it is a product or commodity-backed token. Right? So yes, but don't really care so much. Because these bottles from 2018 will become drinkable and sell to consume on the 6th of May 2021. So there's 1 year that it's in tanks and in barrels, and 2 years that it'll be lying in bottles. Now, we can already sell in tokens, buy tokens on the exchange. It's not that you're locked into that for the 3 years. We're not looking to do a future. This is not crowdfunding to make wine. The wine already exists. We make the wine, and then we're selling the wine through tokenization. It's all about how can we have the price of the token determined by the marketplace itself. What's interesting about this is we were looking to juxtapose two different types of interests. So on the one hand, you have people that are buying tokens because they want access to a fairly priced or inexpensive, in this case, bottle of good wine. Now, some people because they want to drink it, and a lot of other cases because they're going to resell it for fiat in shops and restaurants, etc. So our existing marketplace, 100% of this is transitioning to tokenization. We're not selling wine at a price in pesos and then and a price on the ICO. It all goes to the ICO. But then you have the counterforce of people that say, well, I'm just in this because I want to play with the value, speculate on the value of the token. Now this is interesting because what I'm looking to do with this is to create essentially a floor and a ceiling for the token price, naturally. If the token goes up, let's say when we started the ICO, it was roughly at €3 a bottle. Okay, so let's say that the price goes to €300. Exaggerate, whatever price you want to say. And you might say, well, I bought these tokens. I like Mike's wine, but I don't think it's a €300 bottle of wine. I'm going to sell my tokens and take the profit and go buy something else with it, buy some other wine. Okay, so as soon as you start to sell off on those tokens, people that are speculating for crypto and see that, oh, we've reached the peak, fine, let's everybody sell off. Now there's a massive sell-off. And instead of €300 a token, now it's 50 cents a token, right? But at this point, I'm not concerned about it because we just go to our existing marketplace and say, hey, you know the wine that you've been buying for years, you can buy it for 50 cents now. And you're still going to sell it in your shops and other places at whatever market you want to do. Wine is an interesting product in that sense also because you all know what your favorite wine costs in a shop. And you also know that when you go to a restaurant, you're going to pay 2 or 3 times for the same product, and you still buy it. Why? Because you want it at that point in the restaurant. So it's kind of an interesting product in that sense. So this is how the tokenization works. We do a token every year for each vintage. This year we're gearing up for a harvest in April. And on the 6th of May, so same date every year, we'll do another ICO. And the number of tokens will match the number of bottles that are available, if there's any. 2015, I lost everything to a hailstorm. 2013 had other issues with rot and wasn't up to standard, so we didn't produce any wine that year. Some years we'll do 8,000 bottles, some years we might do 15,000, whatever it is. It's one vineyard with all the data that we're providing and tokenizing it. So what's going to happen with the price? It's anybody's guess. This is an experiment. I'm not an economist. So far we've just doubled the price since the ICO, but the idea is that the valuation of the wine maybe will accompany the pricing. There might be some sort of a match there. So let's imagine we're in February of 2026. And you went to the exchange and you said, well, I want to buy the token from 2026. This is a token for a bottle that's not going to be drinkable for 3 years. Or I could buy the token for 2023, which is immediately available to drink or to resell or to keep in my cellar. Or I'm going to buy the 2018 that's been around for 5 years in the market, and this is what people are saying, and now there's scarcity because there's not that many bottles left. Why should the price be the same over the entire life cycle of that bottle of wine? So that's what this project is about for creating the tokenization. Now the last part I'll share with you is about the question of this extreme traceability, right? How do we know if a wine is any good? How do we know what people actually think about it? Today, we recur on experts. So we ask Robert Parker, we ask Tim Atkins, there's a dozen or so well-known critics, and they say this is a 93 points or a 90 points or whatever it is. Now these people know a lot about wine, they're authentic, but it's subjective, it's their opinion. It's anecdotal, because they probably only had 1 or 2 glasses of the wine in its entire life. And they've said, this is a 93 points based on that moment. And it's very subjectable to manipulation. The bottle that I send to Robert Parker, Tim Atkins, might not be the same bottle that you're getting. And they might see the label and know me and go, yeah, well, Mike invited me to go horseback riding in the Andes, so I'm going to give him more points. Whatever it is, right? So there's a lot of potential for fraud there. The second way of doing it is crowdsourcing opinion, right? The TripAdvisor or Vivino model, where we ask everybody, what do you think about it? And we put together the wisdom of the crowd. That has all kinds of other problems, in my opinion. Most importantly, that we're asking people to make intellectual effort and we're not giving them anything in return. So what we're doing is what's called you drink it, you own it. And it looks like this. In 2021, when the first bottles come out of this tokenized vintage and going forward, you'll have a bottle in your hand and you might have bought it with tokens. You might have gone to a shop and paid for it in euro. I might have given you a bottle for free, whatever. You have the bottle in your hand. You'll be able to scan the back label, serialized, introduce, name, address, tax ID, age, preferences, take a selfie with the bottle, and answer some questions about your experience drinking that bottle. But in exchange for this absolute invasion of your privacy, we'll give you a token which represents 1 share of the company. So now you've gone from being a consumer to being a partner. Now you own part of a vineyard and a winery in Argentina. Now let me ask you what you think about it. Right? Be completely honest. We're partners now. Right? So that allows us to do all kinds of things, like create smart contracts where the amount of profits from our accounting that's also public then becomes part of a dividend payout or any other types of schemes that we want to do, because now the drinker, the wine in your glass, you actually own that. So that's the concept. By the way, this allows us to go another step further and say, all right, you bought the wine, you drank it, you've given us your feedback. We're partners now. Here's a share of the company. Would you like to play a game? You can play a game in one of 5 categories, one or more of 5 categories, being a viticulturist, growing grapes, enologist, making wine, sommelier, tasting wine, a wine business person, or a blockchain IoT expert. And it's a didactic game that will share information with you to learn about these different aspects. But periodically, we'll ask you questions. It's a quiz. And those questions, as much as possible, will be based on the real-world case of Costa Flores Winery. So one question might be, should we irrigate the Cabernet Sauvignon today? To answer the question correctly, you'd have to go to the sensor data and see, this plot of land is below this threshold, it's dry, here's the number, yes, we should irrigate. Okay, you win points. You don't answer the question, or you answer it correctly, you lose points. So now it's like a farmville with a farm behind it, right? It's taking those people that are now our partners and gamifying the experience so that you're actively participating. You're becoming a Turk machine in the most essential element, but really it's how do you take a passive investor, in this case, and turn them into an active participant. It's decentralized farming. It's how we answer the Howey test in the case of the SEC, if you're interested in security tokens. It's how do we go about taking these people and say, no, these are my partners, and I actually ask them when we should irrigate. And their information is going to be more valuable than mine, and they're checking and seeing and validating the sensor data. Right. So if you drink it, you own it, is the concept. Going from vine to wine to the dine and mind, right? Extreme traceability. You could do all kinds of things with this afterwards. Map it to Decentraland, create machine learning algorithms to learn from it. All of the things that we're going to need to do if we're ever going to grow grapes on Mars, which is really the whole objective of this. So, how do we take business data? How do we take the market pricing, all of the sensor information, publish this onto an open platform, and really reach into the perception of the people, and not that we're just suborning you or paying you for your opinion, but how can we change a relationship and saying, look, I'm trying to make beautiful wine, we need to make a sustainable business and pay the salaries, this is how much we're paying, this is how much we're buying, this is an ethical business model, and you can actually become an active partner in this just by drinking it and providing this feedback and sharing your experience. So, in Hindi, there's a phrase which is something like Harangu kibun pelikaje pini pini walakanam, which means well, I've adopted a little bit. The original means every grain of rice has your name on it. And I've changed it to every drop of wine has your name on it. And the point being that when you look at a glass of wine and you think about this is 10,000 years of human culture to get to this particular point of a glass of wine. You know, why did Vitis vinifera come around as a cultivated grape in Persia, and then the role of the Roman Empire and Napoleon, and in the case of Argentina, immigrants from Spain and Italy that went and planted there, and all of this action that comes down to this glass of very complex liquid that you have, right? After blood, wine is the most complex organic liquid that we on a common day-to-day basis, right? There's all this history that goes into it. But as soon as the wine touches your lips, it's yours. And every thought, every delirious idea that comes out of it is you're the owner of it, right? So every drop of wine has your name on it is the idea. How can we take something that has this 10,000 years of history and combine it with something as new as the blockchain and resolve these questions of traceability, tokenization, and transparency. So that's why it's a delicious metaphor for wine. And because it's an open source project, if any of you would like to try the wines or be interested, costaflores.com or Benissimos is where they're available here. But specifically we have openvino.org, costaflores.com, and our wiki page, which has all of the code, all of the designs for the sensors, what our marketing plan is, all the numbers, everything you want to know is available between the wiki and our website. And if any of you are interested to follow up, please let me know. So thank you very much. I interrupted a couple of you that had some questions, but if you have any questions, please let me know. So.
I have two. I'd like to know, why did you make it open source? I mean, to me, incentive might be clear, but why did you decide to make it open source and not as a closed product, which you might sell? And then, second question is, to what extent do you think your solution is scalable to some, I don't know, I come from Slovakia and we also have wineries, but I'm not sure,
very good wineries. So, the open source question seemed obvious to me, that there is a real power in so many ways of getting interest, criticism, availability, participation to do something by being open source. I think there's a real value in the transparency, just communicating it from what I was saying before. Look, today we don't know if our news feeds are legitimate, if the products we're buying are what they say they are, and so I think there's a real value in transparency and open source from that aspect. Also, to create this as a software solution that you're licensing and reselling is not my ambition right now. I want to make really good wine and use these tools to communicate that. It's also a marketing question, right? Now, the scalability question is, I don't really have an answer. A lot of wineries have come up and said, hey, that's really cool, we'd like to do the same thing, how can we apply OpenVino? Does this fit for our winery? And my answer to them up until now is, why don't you wait a year or two and see what works and what doesn't work for me, and then we'll take it from there. So I think there is a real model that could scale up. The fact that I have a tiny winery and a single vineyard, and it's and I'm an IT person, and with this particular ambition means that I can take my company and risk it by doing this. But if I had a company and I'm producing 20 million bottles a year, I probably wouldn't have done any of this, right? Just because there's too many unknowns in the crypto space still. This is really searching to be an actual real world application that you can point at, taste, grab some dirt and say, okay, this is the price of the token and this is why it's this price. So it's a real world application. But I wouldn't have done this if I had a really successful big business and risk it all, because there are so many things that we just don't know about the midterm. I think in the long term it's a scalable business model that will certainly be tweaked in the next couple of years, but who's to say after that? So.
How do you manage fluctuations in value in your token? I hope not that they drop.
Well, so there's two questions about fluctuation and value. One is, if you send me Ether or Bitcoin or X, and I send you tokens for the bottles, and then I don't convert that into fiat, then yeah, I'm running a risk of the fluctuation like that. Now, but that is really more of a financial decision and less of a crypto decision. And I guess the best way to explain that is, the Argentine peso last year at this time was 17 pesos to the dollar, and today it's 38 pesos to the dollar. So if I had received Argentine pesos and decided not to buy euro or US dollars or gold or whatever you want, and just kept those pesos, well, then I've suffered from that devaluation. Has nothing to do with crypto in that sense, right? The other side is, okay, the market decides the fluctuation of the price of the token. So there could be quite a lot of volatility, and I would expect there would be changes over time throughout the life cycle of the bottle, right? It shouldn't be the same price the day the fermentation finishes from the last set of bottles, a really highly valued bottle. They shouldn't be the same price. But having said that, as I was saying before, if the price plummets on the tokens, I know the value of the wine. I know that I have a market already that understands the value of the wine in the sense that it's good wine. And so I can say, hey, you could buy it for 25 cents.
No, I mean, you have to buy input to produce wine. You need to pay rent.
Well, so I receive crypto, I receive pesos, dollars, whatever, and the crypto that I'm receiving, I might hold some of it, but then eventually, like today, I changed a bunch of ether into pesos to pay salaries. I think I'm the first person, maybe not, to have changed Bitcoin into goat guano, goat manure, because that's really good fertilizer for grapes. So yeah, there has to be a overlap into non-crypto economy for sure. But the actual fluctuation of the token, that's the whole point. So if the world all decides at the end of a number of years that I have a 15-cent wine, well then okay, I'm going to stop making wine, but that's not going to be the case.
What I'm just wondering is that basically what you're telling me is becoming a transparent winery gives you partners. Partners provide you with investment money so that you could actually, or they buy the tokens or you get tokens. So basically you're getting finances. But what if we bring more to you? Taking the winery to this kind of business model.
Okay, well, they're not really investors. We're not receiving funding from outside from investors, right? We're selling bottles of wine. Now, if you buy a bottle of wine and then you scan the bottle and give me all your feedback and I give you a share of the company, okay, in a sense you have invested in the company because you bought a bottle, right? But we're not selling shares of the company. And the tokens, again, yes, you're buying tokens, but you're buying bottles of wine. Right? In fact, from the minute you buy the tokens, we're actually invoicing you. This is an ICO done in Argentina. So we're actually invoicing you for bottles of wine based on your token purchase. Now, what kind of input do we get out of that? First of all, you're buying, in some cases, the bottle of wine when it's finished fermentation and not 3 years later. So that's a 3-year advance on a lot of the sales on the bottles, right? Everything that we sold last year wouldn't have been sold for another 3 years anyway. So that's welcome. As the price of the tokens from other previous years increases, so we can increase the price of the ICO, right? So there's more profitability there. But it's very important also that from the transparency element, that there is a way of communications and marketing. Right? So being able to share this with the world in this particular model is invaluable. If you own tokens and you like the wine, and you could say, hey, I part own this company in Argentina that we're making this wine. Aren't you going to be more of a spokesperson than if you have no particular interest in us being successful at this, right? And that, in the case of wine, is really invaluable because again, this is not a commodity like beans or rice or, cotton. This is something that it all depends on what we think the value is.
So maybe I missed this, but is there a buyback program for token, or what happens to the ERC20 token?
So you have the tokens.
Yeah.
You bought them in the ICO, or you bought them on the exchange, or somebody gave them to you. You can either sell them immediately on the exchange, so you've received them and sold them, or you can go to our website when the wine's available and say, I want 12 bottles of wine. I'll say, great, give me 12 tokens. I burn the tokens.
Okay.
As soon as I receive them to go burn the tokens, and at that stage I say, where am I shipping this wine to? This is going to Buenos Aires or it's going to Amsterdam. Okay, in Amsterdam, this is going to be your amount, which is basically the shipping and handling and the import duties on those bottles, and then you receive the bottles, and that's it. Right? Now, you can drink them, you can resell them, you can do whatever you like with them. But yeah, as soon as you sent me the tokens to have the wine delivered, then we destroy those tokens because there's a finite number of bottles and a finite number of tokens. No, it's not an NFT, right? It's not a fungible token in the sense that each bottle has a different value separate to each other. So there's 16,384 MTB 18 tokens. There's 16,000 bottles. I just need to, if you send me 12 tokens, I send you 12 of those bottles. It's the same lot of wine that's been produced the same day, the same way, bottled at the same moment, right? So in that sense, there's no reason to distinguish the token for a particular bottle. To do that, you could do that, but it doesn't really add too much value, and it increases exponentially the logistics of getting you that bottle to your token, right?
What if something wrong? What if something bad happens to the wine? You know?
Okay, so there's a few cases we can imagine. So there's like I said, a pallet crashes, and I lose 800 bottles. That's why I've kept some of the tokens. So those tokens, I just burn them myself, and we're done with it. They're out of circulation. There's a earthquake in the winery, and all the bottles are broken, right? In that case, the only thing I can do is offer you tokens from the next vintage. They're not the vintage that you bought based on the data, but that's what I can offer. And the third option is the Argentine government has kicked me out of the country. They set fire to the vineyard. There's an earthquake, and everything is out of business. I'm sorry, you lost the value in your tokens. It's not bad compared to all the other tokens you have or shares in companies you might own. So, I mean, this is not our first year making wine. Everything that we're doing is based on this. I can't not deliver the wine and expect to remain in business. So yes, there is a risk involved as a consumer, as a purchaser of tokens. If you're buying a token that you're not going to immediately exercise, right? So right now you have to wait 3 years, but 3 years from now you could buy a token and immediately cash it in for a bottle if that's what you want.
But what is the difference like from forward contract or futures? You know?
Well, future, you're speculating about something that doesn't exist yet, necessarily. I'm saying that here's the wine, it's in the bank, it's in the bottle, it's already fermented and...
It's like a complete product, it doesn't exist, you know?
No, the product exists, you just need to hold it 3 years before you're going to drink it.
It's not the wine you buy.
If you're buying a token from a recently created one, then yes, you have to wait for those 3 years. Is there a risk involved? More than if you're immediately buying a token and respecting delivery. Now, my expectation would be that the price you're going to pay for the token in the ICO 10 weeks from now is going to be lower than what you would pay for that token 3 years later when that wine's already deliverable to 6 years later when there's scarcity in that particular wine. So, yes.
Thank you for the talk. I'm not a wine expert, but as far as I'm concerned, the wines from different years tend to age differently, and it's sometimes only in a matter of years that you can actually distinguish between the quality from wines produced in different years.
Yes.
So how do you correct for that?
Well, and I don't correct for it at all. In fact, that's kind of the point, right? If you throw out all of the data about the year in the vineyard, in the winery, allow anybody to look at it. So maybe you're not a wine expert, but other people would say, oh yeah, this was a good year, and look, this is the information from Mike. He's going to have great wine this year. It's going to be a mediocre wine this year. It's going to be an excellent wine. You can take that input. Right now you don't have any of that information, right? But you can take that information and decide, well, I'll buy a token and wait for 3 or 4 or 5 or 7 years, or I won't, and I'll just wait until the wine's available, and then if I want to try it, I'll buy it. That's what I was saying. Then I would execute it. There's nothing that it's not that you have to buy the token and wait. I had to start from someplace. So we had to start with one vintage that's completely tokenized, and that's why there's, from the 2018, it won't be until 2021. But the idea is that each year, because there are differences in the climate and in all kinds of variables, there's no reason why one year should be the same price as the other year. They should be different prices based on expectations or data from the quality, based on people that have been tasting it and say, wow, you know, the 2018's tasting really good, the 2019 not so great. Well, why should you pay the same price for both of those? Let the market decide.
We can take one last question.
You mentioned that the tokens don't represent a physical bottle of wine. They do, but there's
Not a specific physical
yeah,
bottle.
exactly.
Yeah.
You could actually do a fraud-proof wine bottle. So you could put an RFID tag in the top, so it scans, and then you can prove that that is actually your wine.
Well,
have you ever thought about doing something like that?
no, so the wine bottles themselves will actually be serialized, right?
Just like then, normally.
So actually the bottles will be serialized in that they'll have a different number for each bottle. What we're saying is that, okay, this is bottle 37527. I don't have to match that with a specific token.
Right, yeah.
Right? Now, when you received the bottle and you gave back your tasting and whatever, and you said, yeah, I didn't like this at all, this is just horrible, then I'm gonna look and say, okay, are there any bottles around that when the bottling process, there's certain things, so yeah, it's good for tracking that. As far as creating the token serialized, which is basically a non-fungible token, you could do that. The problem is that when I have to send you your bottle, I have to go through and find that particular bottle.
Sequential manufacturing is very difficult.
Yeah, you could do it, it just doesn't really add much value at this stage. Right? Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much.